Hi, everybody. Want to kill a few minutes here as we try to get our audience building on the YouTube and wait for some people to log on. While I do that, I would like to introduce our ASL interpreter. Her name is Mona Jean. Hi. Mona Jean, would you do me a favor? If any of the jokes that I try to say today sort of fall flat, feel free to punch them up for the deaf community. That'd be awesome. Thank you. All right, so, oh my God. I've been in some Zoom meetings, but I've never realized how scruffy my beard is getting. When I was in high school, my friends used to listen to this band called Lagwagon. And they had this song called Razor Burn, where they talked about a beard of shame. I mean, this is kind of a shameful beard. I look more homeless than stuck in quarantine, but I'll have to do with it as I will. Anyway, I want to give you a quick little tidbit about this podcast thing, whatever that I'm doing, and what it's about. This panel is on screenwriting, and screenwriting specifically, we're going to be bringing up conversations that are purposely dealing with inclusion and disability. For the past 6 years, this time of year, when it's springtime out, I always participate in this thing called the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge, which is a film challenge where people make a film over the course of a weekend, and it stars or is directed principally or written by somebody that has a disability. And well, we're in quarantine. So this year it's been postponed. And I felt a nagging, gnawing at myself that I wanted to do something. I missed these people that I would hang out with every year, and we would complain about how hard it's going to be coming up to it. It would be an insane weekend. And then we would all laugh about how crazy and fun it was for a month or two afterwards. And so I wanted to do something that could reach out to that audience, to that people, because we're all stuck at home. And I want to be able to do something for myself and for you guys that maybe when this is all done, we can walk out of this and have something to show for it. When the quarantine's all done. So here we go. Let's kind of jump into it. One quick thing, there's no official sponsors for this show, but I have my own unofficial sponsor, and it's toothpaste. I know we're all being nagged that we need to wash our hands and get all the coronavirus off of it and stuff, but when this is all done, we're gonna have to have face-to-face meetings. And if you're not brushing your teeth, you're gonna have some heinous breath. So keep your grill pearly white and keep the stank out of there, and please brush your teeth as well. All right, cool. Let's get on with it. Rather than giving you guys the normal introduction dribble, listing off somebody's IMDb credits or what their Wikipedia bio says, I thought I would give each person 60 seconds for them to introduce themselves and let them tell you who they are in their own words. So our very first panelist today is Reed Agnew. Reed, come on down. Hey, Reed, don't forget to unmute yourself, brother.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. You have 60 seconds to tell us who Reed Agnew is.
Oh, well, I could probably do that in about 20 seconds. I'm a writer, and I've been a TV writer, and I've written short stories, and I've also been a producer, which involves a lot of other things besides just writing. And I don't know. That's all. I've been doing this since I've been writing in entertainment for about 17 years, and on a bunch of different types of shows. And I've been everything from staff writer to showrunner, and I still don't think I've seen it all. So and I'm still writing, and I still have a lot of fun with it, especially when I'm by myself writing at my desk.
All right, that's your time. Thanks, Reed. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Or whatever this is. Next, coming up, we have Danielle Perez. Come on in, Danielle.
Hey, what's up? Nice to see you guys.
60 seconds. Tell us about yourself.
You've got it on the clock. I was going to start mine, but I guess I don't have to. What a joy to be with a producer and not have to produce myself. My name is Daneille Perez. I am a stand-up comedian. I'm an actor. I'm a writer. I was a cast member in the Cbs Showcase this year, 2020. This week was kind of cool. I was on the cover of the calendar section for the LA Times. Yeah, I have written for unscripted shows. I've written sketches for the showcase. I write my stand-up, and I am in some stalled Netflix projects. So cool. 7 seconds. I'm funny on Twitter. Okay. There we go.
Right on. Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. Next up is David Radcliffe.
Hi.
Hey, David.
How's it going? I guess I'm right on the clock. Okay, so my name is David Radcliffe. I was born with cerebral palsy because I was a premature baby, which was fun. And I written on The Rookie on ABC. And after The Rookie, I went to a Netflix show that's not out yet, so I don't know how much I can say about it, but I went from an hour-long cop drama to a half-hour comedy for families. And that switch was really interesting and fun. And then after that, I did some work on Crip Camp, which is a documentary that's on Netflix. And I'm now helping with some of the marketing with that. So I should make mention, if you haven't seen Crip Camp, check it out on Netflix. It was the Audience Award-winning documentary at Sundance about a disability rights movement that leads to the development or the passing of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So that's me.
Nice. Thank you, David. Love this song. And last but not least, everybody please welcome Rebekah Walendzak.
Hi, I came in early. Ha ha ha. Hi, I'm Rebekah Walendzak, and I'm already a fan of all the people who are here. So I was cheering for you, Danielle, and it's really great to be with everyone. I teach sketch comedy writing at the Second City. I taught in Chicago, and I currently teach in Hollywood. And I'm a writer and I'm an actor. A lot of sketch comedy, writing for TV and film, and I had a live LGBT soap opera in Chicago that ran for 3 years. But right now, most of the time, I teach sketch comedy, and I teach a lot of people around the country and the world, because our theater is now completely online. So it gives the opportunity for people to practice their writing and also to have some fun by improvising from their homes off their couch. Yeah, it was a plug. That's what I did. I also have 2 dogs, and I love pizza. So that's what I've got.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebekah. And since this is the first episode I'm doing of scene to screen, I'm going to give myself 60 seconds so you guys can get to know who I am, and away I go. I grew up in Orange County, California. I love making movies ever since I was born. I went to school at Cal State Fullerton. I got a degree in film and television production. I love making movies, and making movies, I decided to start my own company. And instead of becoming a director or a writer, that running your own company makes you a really good producer. So that way I'm now the producer and the owner of Renaissance Man Productions. I didn't get any of the things that I wanted to be able to have living in Orange County, because there's a lot of really awesome filmmakers here in Los Angeles. So I had to move to Los Angeles, which is what I did. And when I did that, I started over at the bottom, and I had to work my way back up to the top. And in doing so, I took some screenwriting classes, and I also started working with some other bands. And so now I direct and produce music videos and a bunch of other short films too. About 6 years ago, I ran into Nick Novicki, he runs the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge. He told me about the need for disability inclusion in media. My ASL interpreter is probably hating me right now. And ever since then, I have been an advocate for people with disabilities in television, radio, and film. That's my time. Damn it, I didn't get all the way through everything I wanted to say. Anyway, that's a start. That's a little bit about me. Who says, someone says, let's get into it. Oh, that's on Pod Save America. Let's get into it. So guys, thank you all for being here. I would like to start off with kind of a general question for people that are at home, that whether you have a disability or not, we're all stuck, we're kind of bored. And I particularly think that we who write or have the ability to create, whether it's jokes or movies or television shows or whatever, sketches, we have this ability to, it's a solitary job. You write and you're being productive. So in trying to encourage other people with or without disabilities to try and make the most of their time here in quarantine, I want to know from you, where do your ideas come from? At the very beginning of this process, before you can put anything on a page, before you can, write a joke or come up with a sketch, there has to be ideas. Kind of each one of you, jump in whenever you want. How do you pull your ideas together?
Okay, I'll go.
Danielle.
Everyone's like, well, I mean, most of my writing is stand-up. And so it's very personal. So a lot of my writing comes just from my general lived experience in my life, what I'm going through. And that's what I mine when I'm writing sketches, my pilot, all of it is based around me. And also being a person who's disabled, right? Being Afro-Latina, like, you have to create stories that you want to be in. No one's just gonna write a character for me, honestly. That's just the way Hollywood works. So I have to be able to write for myself, and I have to write stories and create stories that I want to see myself in.
Fair enough. Oh, Rebekah.
Yeah. For me,
It's
it's
you next,
often,
David.
Okay, sorry, David. For me, it's often ridiculous things that I see on TV, or ridiculous conversations that have happened, or stupid things that I've done. And I like to exploit my foot and mouth syndrome, or my ability to break things all the time around the house. So it's really, it's a way for me to sort of exorcise my imperfections, right? So there's silly, dumb things that I do, and I think it's funny to write about. And so I use myself sort of as the foil, and I heighten myself in the situations that I have. Or it's a way for me to also, because it's sketch, it's beginning, middle, and end in a very short amount of time. And so I'm able to just highlight a fun situation or a ridiculous situation. And then sometimes I'm taking a walk or I'm taking a shower and I'm like, the dumbest idea that I've ever had in my life. And so I have to put it down because that's what I do. So it's the dumber the idea, the more I know I need to put it on, I need to write it, and it needs to become a scene.
Cool. What about you, David?
One of the reasons why I feel strongly about more people with disabilities doing this kind of work, because there are so few of us in the industry that are getting opportunities, is because so much of what you have to do when you're developing story in a room is think about opposition and displacement. And for people with disabilities, that's a big part of our life, is figuring out solving problems or putting on a good face for other people to get something that we're after, or making people feel more comfortable so that they don't disenfranchise us. And really, that's most of what TV, good TV, is looking for. And so they don't know that they need people like us, but once we get there, I think, depending on the show, we have a lot to offer, because most of these characters are driven by conflicts with the outside world, which is a lot of what disability or any underrepresented group experiences.
Yeah, well, I think to add to that, I mean, conflict is what drives shows. you need conflict, disability or not. But I do think, like what you said, there is a special set of circumstances that's innate when you have an able-bodied audience that doesn't understand disability issues. So, Reed, what about you? What you got?
Where do my ideas come from? I don't know. I mean, I like maybe once a week or once a day even, I think of an idea, and for me it's less realizing what's a good idea and more like punching holes in what I think is a good idea until I see that it's not good. And I think a really important part of writing is being able to figure out what's not good and what's good, and finding a little diamond in the rough. And when you think of a funny idea, it's very important to start thinking of that idea in terms of like, yeah, it's a funny idea, but is it just a skit? Is it just a funny concept, or is there some depth to it? Is there who are the characters, and really like how do the characters relate to one another? And then in terms of like, that's just in terms of building the world. And I think of it as like, you want to be able to like plant a seed in like a very fertile ground. So it's basically finding a world with characters in it where I just sort of feel that like, okay, this, I don't know exactly why, but I feel like this can go on and on and on. And there's many different avenues to explore within this world. And so, and then in terms of characters, I often just channel. I don't write with actors in mind. I'm lucky enough to know a lot of funny people in my life, and really I just channel what they say. I have a friend named Mike, and I have an old childhood friend named Mike, and he's so funny, but he doesn't even know that he's funny because it's just the way he says things. And sometimes I'll be like, okay, this character that I'm writing is a fictional character, but let's write him as Mike. And then, when I want the character to say something like, I want to kill that guy, I'm like, how would Mike say that?
Yeah.
And make it more like.
I like one of the things that you said where it's like, and this leads to another question that I had here, is that, you punch holes in things until you realize that they're not funny or they're not good. I think someone in Danielle's situation who's a comedian, I'm assuming you can write a joke and you put it up, and when the audience is like, wah, 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 the joke's no good, so you can go back and recraft it and make it better. So what are, like, Danielle or David or like, how do you guys, when you don't have an audience, how are you checking these things to see if the idea is good to begin with?
I think you have to allow yourself the latitude to, and maybe I'm saying this for instruction for myself, to float the idea and just play with it for a while, even if it seems like the dumbest idea you've ever had. Because I think a lot of times there's an impulse to not put it on paper at all. And if you don't put something on paper, then you literally have nothing. But if you put something on paper, you have something you can work from. And I think a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this too, will stop ourselves by doing all this focus grouping in our own head before we actually create something. And I think that's probably especially true during this coronavirus time. I think we're all feeling this sort of molasses. I'm seeing it on Twitter, like from executive level writers all the way to staff writer. Like nobody's feeling like they're particularly creative right now. And so you have to take that extra step to just put something down, just to get moving.
Right. Danielle, when you have a joke and it bombs on stage, I mean, I would assume you can fix it right away, but like when you're writing, you've also been in sketches. I know, I believe it was last year you made a film for the Disability Film Challenge. Do you have any experience or any tools or tricks for polishing things up or figuring those quality things out when it comes to story?
I think separating like the writer from the editor, like I have a really hard time with that, where just giving, like what David was saying, like yourself the space to just like write it, let it be what it's going to be, and then come back to it. we know it's funny, but also having friends that you trust to read your stuff. Like all of my friends are mostly comics and stand-ups, other writers, actors. And so I have a good group of friends that I can go to and be like, hey, can you check this out? Let me know if this is good, or what do what are your thoughts? What are your feelings? But yeah, I mean, you just have to try it. If you can get, especially for sketches or pilots, if you can get a group together to like actually hear it out loud, with like actors reading the parts, like just doing a reading, that helps so much.
Yeah.
Because writing it and reading it in your head is very different than hearing those words spoken out loud.
Totally. So there's a conscious effort to make it a team sport. Although we feel like we're in it alone, you proof it through other people. Rebekah?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I say yes and to all of those, and they both were saying the exploring and heightening and turning off your internal editor, right? If you tell yourself no and it's bad before you start, then it's going to be bad. And if you stop yourself, it's never going to get on the page. So I'm coming from the teacher side of put it all down. Don't just vomit it out on the page and see what happens. And that's different than when you're staffed and you have a specific show and that kind of stuff. If you're just coming up with your ideas, just throw it out there. Use lists, use clusters. Free write and just write all of it. And even what I even like to do is even talk to myself while I'm writing it. Like, that's ridiculous. This is stupid. All right, I'm going to keep going with it. Just to give yourself the opportunity to have a safe space to have your brain explore and see where your unique, beautiful brain is going to go with this. Because my brain myself will say, you're not enough, or this has already been done, or this is hack. But if I don't give myself the opportunity to see it through, I don't know where I can take it. And then I could put it away, go on to something else, come back, read it and go, wow, maybe that wasn't so great. But this thing right here, this little thing right here, this is the good stuff. And if I can get something like that from just a fun idea and I can take it out and then I can explore and heighten in a new, exciting way. But if I tell myself no, the answer to no is, all right, I didn't do it. But if I just say yes and I keep trying it, I give myself the opportunity to see what is possible. And I also, you can erase things. So if it's awful, you go back and you change it, you cut and you paste. So we don't have to worry about saving pages. We use computers. We have lots of file pages.
Yeah. So building on just a regular idea, there's this term that I've been blessed with by different people I've pitched to that would say, like, we like your idea, but can you make it more high concept? Yay. And I don't know if this would be considered high concept or not, Reed, but you have, you've worked on shows like Wilfred and Son of Zorn. Wilfred is a guy sees his neighbor's dog as like human-ish, and Son of Zorn has basically like a He-Man type animated character existing in a regular sort of sitcom life. Both of those are super quirky. So really funny stuff, but how do you take something that's what I would call a high concept like that and make it relatable? Because if you just kind of spit it out, it might be like, oh, no one would ever like that. So how do you make it tangible for people to enjoy?
Well, I think like I said before, it's like really realizing like, okay, this is funny. Like, okay, this is a guy in a dog suit, and his friend is a mentally ill sort of main character, and and with Son of Zorn, it's like, okay, this is an animated He-Man moving around in a real world, but it's no different than any other. That it's no different than a drama, in that you really have to, like, write about who these characters are, what they're. This is always the key to storytelling, is like, who are these characters are, what's the main problem in their life, how is this wacky situation changing them, and what do they need to learn, and how are they learning it through this maybe crazy, wacky experience. It's not relatable, but I think that the emotional aspects of it, and like fears that they have, and desires and disappointments and triumphs, are all still things that are relatable to everybody. I think everybody can relate to not fitting in, or heartbreak or happiness, or, you know, wanting, you know, being in love with a woman who's moved on from you, or, you know, these are things that, you know, I feel like The Simpsons is a really crazy, at the time it was a really crazy concept, but I think the reason why people loved it so much is because it's really, you know, it's these yellow animated people, but I feel like we really relate to them, you know?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that that I'm sure we've all heard, especially when we first started off our writing careers, is that a teacher or a mentor, or it's in probably every single writing book, is write what you know. And so I want to kind of bend this conversation of you know, where ideas come from and how we can build upon them to making sure that there is inclusion and disability. It's a shame that Danielle doesn't have roles that people are writing that she could be in, that she has to write these roles for herself. So how do you write what you know, which we all have a wealth of experience, but how do you write what you know and make sure that you're being responsible as you try to be inclusive and try to incorporate diversity and disability? Do you have any suggestions on that, David?
Yeah, I have hours of thoughts on that. So one of the exercises that they have us do in the Disney writing program, which is where I came from to get on The Rookie, is you read through all the blurbs of the upcoming pilots, and you write a paragraph about how your experience connects to this particular show. And when I went to meet with The Rookie, I was actually in the half-hour pile. I didn't have any police experience. It was a show about a guy in his 40s. I'm not there yet. But I did understand that in the pilot and in some of the earlier episodes, there was this emphasis on him being physically a little behind. He's older than the other rookies. He's a little bit slower, but he works really hard and he has good attitude. And sometimes his life experience offers insight into what his job demands. So that was where I leaned in the interview, was like, I have been physically behind most people I know all my life, and that's probably unlikely to change. So it was less about me writing what you know and more about what you have felt. Because I think if you write what you have felt, and this comes back to what Reed was saying, if you know those feelings, you can write to that feeling and still make yourself accessible to various shows. Now, on the subject specifically of how do we get more diverse people on the show, that is really only a decision that can be made at the upper levels of the ladder. So you can come in on the lower levels and be a diverse person, but not necessarily see yourself represented, because there's a lot of machinery that gets into place before the production. So you really just have to keep your head down and try to tough it out so that you can work your way up the ladder to make decisions, and then hire all your friends, because that's what everybody else does.
Nice. Danielle, do you have anything to add to that? Unmute, sweetheart.
I unmuted myself. I'm sorry. Yeah, you can be in a room hired as a diverse person, and that doesn't necessarily translate to what's on screen. I think yeah, if you, oh God, I'm sorry, I have a lot of feelings on this. There's so many feelings.
Bring it on, let it out.
All of it. No, if you want to include disabled people in your story and you're not disabled, that's great, that's fine. Definitely work with disabled people in the production, hire disabled people as consultants, hire disabled people in your room, on your set, incorporate that so that you're telling an authentic story, right? You're getting that feedback. But I think also, you know, you don't have to write a disabled character. The character can just exist. And I think that's what I was speaking to earlier when I said, like, there are not parts for me. part of what I did in Showcase was I wrote a sketch where it was like a Hustlers parody, but it's like, I'm sexy, I'm in charge, I'm a bitch. And I don't get to see disabled people be sexy or a bitch. I just don't. I gotta like to see them be sad. Like literally every drama audition is a disabled Air Force vet who can no longer fly. And wow,
Totally.
look, check it out, she can't even walk. So
I was actually going to ask you about that, because I got to go to the CBS Diversity Showcase this year, and that Hustler sketch you're talking about was like definitely one of the ones that like had me in stitches the whole time. And with that, so for anybody that doesn't know, the CBS Diversity Showcase is something that the CBS network puts on. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they bring back some alumni writers, and then there's a bunch of talented performers like yourself. And but not all of the performers are writers. So you came up with this sketch idea. I know you're credited as one of the writers on it. Like, is that just your resolve bringing it in to kind of up story levels, or were you a special case because none of the other performers could write as good as you could? Because I mean, like you nailed that. It was so funny, like watching you like slow roll around the pole, and I mean, like it was awesome.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. The way the Showcase worked this year, there have been some shakeups at CBS with the Showcase specifically, but all the writers were alumni, and there were 20 performers, but we were, as performers, were all encouraged to pitch and write along, you know, either by ourselves or with the writers. And so Jimmy Fowley and Sophia Gonzalez, they're the ones that they were like, what? We want to do a Hustlers parody. And they're like, what if Danielle's a hustler? And then they were like, Danielle, do you want to write on this? I'm like, of course. Yeah. So it was very much a collaborative effort, but because of my stand-up comedy background, you know, I very much served as a joke machine for that, just like throwing out alts. And even with everyone else's sketches, it got to a point where once it gets to table read, which was every week, it operated very much like the SNL writers room, where we have pitch day, then there's table read, then there's rewrites, then there's blocking, and then a sketch gets banked, and either it makes it to stage or it doesn't. And you know, you hear a sketch at table read, and then immediately you're like, oh, here's a punch up, here's, you know, so we were all helping each other out in that way. And I think I like working with other people, even though stand-up is a solo sport. I like the collaborative nature of being able to punch up. Maria Bamford, a technique that she uses for writing and developing her material is joke machine. So it's basically you and another person going back and forth, joking, telling a premise, seeing how you can heighten it, going back and forth. And that's something that I like to play with my friends. And I feel like I'm rambling.
Cool. No, that works a segue, because I want to start kind of getting into process a little bit. So Rebekah, you and I were talking a few days ago, and you educated me on something, and it seems kind of like a no duh moment, but I would like you to define the difference briefly between sketch and improv. And then when it comes to sketch writing, is it formulaic in any way? Is it is there an arc to coming up with a good sketch?
Yeah, so improvisation on its own is a technique of saying yes and creating situations, and it's its own art form of make-believe, pretending, and building things together. And the art of it is, what can all of us together, all six of us, or just Danielle and I, we say yes and to each other, and we create a world, and we just keep building on that. And that on its own is its own art form, right? With sketch, and the way the Second City does it, is they use that as a way to generate sketch ideas. And so sketch comedy, they are short little vignettes that go into an entire review, and that's REVUE, right? And so that's what SNL is. It's a night of a bunch of different short pieces performed by the same ensemble. And so using improvisation to generate ideas, just like the joke machine that Danielle was talking about, is people going back and forth and saying, saying yes and to each other and trying things out rather than saying no, but no, that's not going to work. Instead, it's, ooh, that's an idea. Yes, and let's keep building on that and seeing where it goes. And so when you're writing it just depends on how you're generating it. If you're generating it through improvisation, you're watching the people creating it who are in the scene. You see how it goes. You've got someone side coaching. It ends, and you could say, let's take these moments and let's work on this, right? But if you're a writer on your own, it's hard to have those people there improvising with you. So you use the concept of writing improvisationally, using that technique of saying yes and to yourself. But what you do is you create, you get to say, what's the location? Who are the people? What are their relationships with each other? I call it being the god of the scene. I get to dictate how it's going to be, because in an improv scene, you're not allowed to do that. That's a bad improviser who's directing the scene. But I get to direct the scene. But I get to build character through character. I get to become the character. I get to use those tools of improv where I'm an actor who's playing with another actor and we're creating this thing. I get to kind of jump into each character and I get to perform with myself, saying yes and to the situation, right? In an improv scene, if you have enough experience, you can kind of feel that you get the who, what, and where out of the way really quickly, and then you try to get into a heightened moment, and that's where the of a scene is. But when you're writing, sketch comedy is short, so you can't take 3 to 5 pages just to get into the scene and then move into it, right? So we use a 5-point structure. It's a lot like filmic structure, right? So it's beginning, middle, and end. But in between the beginning and the middle, you've got the first turning point. And then between the middle and the end, you've got the second turning point. And I like to think of it as like turning on a faucet. So this is just quick and, try not to be too graphic. Sorry. But it's like if I'm writing the most boring scene in the world of Rebekah's going to take a bath, like, who, what, and where. Rebekah goes into the bathroom to take a bath. She closes the door. Great. The turning point, I turn on the faucet. That's where the interesting, unique thing happens. The whole middle of the scene is all the things that I'm doing while the water is filling up. And it could be that I slip and I fall, or I could drop something electronic in the tub. The most boring scene is it fills up. And then when I'm ready, I get in. And then when I want the scene to be done, I turn it off. That's the turning point, because I'm pushing it to the resolution. And then at the end of it, I have that quick moment of Rebekah lays back and goes, and that's the out of the scene. I can't say it's the most interesting scene in the world that I've just created, but it's a short journey where it's who, what, and where in the beginning with some interesting change. It's a conflict or a change. The fun of the entire scene is that middle section. It's the jelly of the jelly donut, we'll say. And that's where all the fun, the game, the journey, the bits is. And then we just have to push it to a place where it's going to end. And does the character, or is the objective, do they succeed or does it fail? And then you just have that quick moment. Where if you've got a movie, or if you've got a television show, it's different. It's a longer amount of time to get to those. But in ours, it's really a quick who, what, and where to get in there. Try it at a heightened moment. We like to say, what makes today different than any other day? Why is it important to them? Different schools have different schools of thoughts, right? But our philosophy is, why is today important? And that helps you get into the scene more, and then you just follow that structure.
Let me make a quick announcement. I'm watching the YouTube stream over here, just to let you guys know. If you make a comment in the YouTube chat, you can put a question in there, and in the last 10 or 15 minutes so here, we'll throw it up to the panel, and you can get your question answered by one of these amazing people that I get to talk to today.
And if I may, just to finish up real quick before, there isn't always a formula. You can play with game scenes that are fun and different. So that is basic story structure, but there's so many different kinds of scenes: fish out of water scenes, center and eccentrics. You've got game scenes, clothesline scenes, blackouts galore. So that's basic story structure, but there's a bunch of different ways you can focus your scenes to focus on action, character, that sort of thing.
David, were you going to add something to that?
Yeah, so some of what Rebekah is describing, even though it's a different format, a lot of these questions come up for writing an hour-long network television show. So, I as an example, on The Rookie, we would start conversations with well, what's the interesting cop area of this particular episode. He's a rookie, so he has a lot to learn. So what are some things that he can learn about police procedure wise, and then how does whatever he learns feed into his personal growth or the other character's personal growth by the end? And then we have to find, through a lot of process of discussion and throwing things up on the wall and scrapping ideas and saving them for we have to find these turning points, like Rebekah described, except in our case, we had to find 5 of them because it was a 6-act show and they insert commercials at every act break. So you have to find these really interesting or exciting or surprising moments at the end of every act. And hopefully you can do that for 20 episodes for several years. I don't want to do the math on how many act breaks that is, but it's a lot.
That's a lot of math. Reed, when you guys are doing it for the shows that you've worked on, is it a similar process? Because you've got a lot of, there's a lot of comedy in the stuff that you do, and I can only imagine that it's like you could have a setup to any given joke and then have 5 amazing punchlines. Like how is that organized? How is that dealt with when you're trying to maintain some sort of 5-part structure like Rebekah and David were talking about?
Well, I think it's a matter of I think it's similar to sketch writing in that like things need to be escalating. And I learned in writers' rooms, I learned from some really smart people to sort of think of storytelling in terms of act breaks, and this goes back to like the Greek 3-act journey of a story where what happens in the first act, what happens at the end of the first act, that break, which escalates things, what happens at the second act, at the end of the second act, which escalates things even more and probably like is a little bit of like a twist that involving a problem that was presented by the end of the first act, and probably like in solving the problem presented at the first act, you've created maybe an even bigger problem. And then like, what's the ending? And so once you have those 3 things, I think it's like you start to fill in like, how do we get to that?
Are you doing that with just like how many jokes you can shove in there once you have the plot of the story? Like, I feel like writing so funny. What's your secret?
Well, I feel like being funny is probably the easy part. Like I know funny people, and like either you're funny or you're not. So, but what a rarer skill is, and what a rarer gift is being able to tell a good story. And therefore, I think that like when you come to a joke, I feel like the joke has to. You don't have time in a 30-page script to dilly-dally with riffing and joking and improvising so much. So I feel like if something can be funny and also be speaking to character and is maybe born out of character and not a joke, I think the funniest stuff isn't jokes. It's like Ricky Gervais on The Office, for instance. He's so funny because he's not funny, it's based on his character, and you're kind of cringing and laughing at him. So I feel like by the time you get to like, what's the joke? It has to be like, this is a joke, but what is it also saying about the person this is funny, but also what is it saying about the person who's saying it? And also, if a joke can be also driving story and if a joke can be speaking to story and character and be a joke, that's like a hat trick. So I don't think like I start with like funny jokes in mind. I think of like, what's a good story in the same way that a drama writer would think of it. And then it's like, okay, now what makes it funny? And that's kind of the icing on the cake. The icing on a cake that's very difficult to bake,
Yeah, definitely.
And without the story and without those escalations and without relating to these characters and without, then who cares? Then after episode 2, you're like, I don't care about these characters anymore. Like,
got it.
Like Chris Farley, Van Down by the River. Like, I love that character, but if he were to die, I wouldn't care.
How long is he going to be living by the river?
Like if the character were to die,
go? Yeah.
I mean, if the character were to die, I wouldn't care. I do care that Chris Farley died. It's so sad.
Yeah. No, I got you. We all love and miss Chris. But David, you were going to add something to that, and then I've got our first question.
Yeah. So just to link from what Reed was saying, I think some of this also ties back to your initial question about including characters with disabilities, because I think one of the reasons we don't get included is because people are fearful that in writing about us, particularly in comedy, the joke is naturally going to be on the disabled person. And I think if you think about ways to flip it so that the joke, for example, Ricky Gervais is a great example, because his comedy comes from his own, and also like Leslie Knope, they're two very different characters, but their comedy comes from their own, either their own indifference to other people's needs or their own overreaching to try to be a good person. And if you put a disabled person next to that character in that scene, then you get a lot of mileage out of not making fun of disabled people, but making fun of a culture that thinks we need to be paternalized. And so there's opportunity for comedy with disability, but it doesn't necessarily have to come from it being funny that I can't walk.
Yeah. Before I get to the questions that we have here, David and Danielle, mistakes that you've seen in writing of characters with disability, or things that people should avoid. If they're like, you know what, I need to be more aware of this. I need to be more inclusive of creating characters with disabilities. What should they not do? Go, Danielle.
Okay. It doesn't have to be a tragedy. They don't have to be on the verge of death or dying, or it doesn't have to be, they don't have to be a saint, you know, they don't have to be this perfect person that's meant to inspire. I think like Walter White is like a really good example of like a disabled character, like he has cancer and is a villain and you're rooting for him, and that's interesting and exciting. Yeah, I think that, yeah, we don't have to be perfect and we don't have to be just tragic. We can have fun.
Yeah. If people don't know how to see people with disabilities have fun, go check out Danielle's comedy set, because girl, you know how to have fun. David, what were you gonna say?
When you asked this question, my first thought was like there are so few examples of representation at all that we would be fortunate to have a bunch of representation to pick from, so we could say this is not working. But the sample size is so small, I hardly know where to start. But one example is, you know, if you see a movie, like I have Complicated Feelings About Me Before You, which is a movie where a quadriplegic who's obviously bitter because he's a quadriplegic, because that's all that movies know how to do, falls in love with Emilia Clarke, which would be a blessing for anyone, and still is feeling really horrible about his life, as Danielle alluded to. But within that movie, there were some scenes that just by virtue of those scenes being there, I thought, wow, we never see this. Like he takes her to the opera, they go to a dance, you know, like those situations are not commonly shown. The unfortunate thing is that it was just all under the umbrella of him being miserable.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mixed bag. I think if you write characters that are interesting for reasons other than their disability, you're already on to a good start. But a lot of times people start with the disability and work outward from there. And I think if they did the reverse, it would be a lot more interesting.
Yeah, personally, with the stuff that I've done with the Disability Film Challenge, I always just try to write a good story, and then I'll take somebody I know, like my friend Diana Elizabeth Jordan. She has cerebral palsy. I'll just be like, okay, Diana, you are a police detective. And she's just like, who's going to give a 50-year-old Black woman with cerebral palsy a role of a police detective? And I'm like, that guy. And it winds up being really fun, and people get over the disability really quick. But enough about me. Let's get on to our first question. This is from Hollis. She says, let's talk episodic. how do you get into the path of a writing career? How do you get into the rooms? What kind of portfolio do you need? How do you prepare whatever you're going to need to hand over to, I don't know, an agent, a manager, a showrunner? What's a good kit for a burgeoning writer to have? Reed, I hope you're this way.
Yeah. Oh man, that's the question. That's the $1 million question. You know, for me, it goes down to basically like anything is a little bit of luck. I mean, for me, it's been a lot of luck in just meeting right people at the right time, but working hard, you know. I mean, writing all the time, writing every day, always having material. I was just talking to a younger writer a couple of days ago. This is what I would do, actually. And when I was younger, I was a journalist. And so I used to be able to like email editors and harass them and be like, please, they write. And then I pitch them ideas and stuff. And eventually they would back and be like, okay, go write your idea, sort of with the tone of like hoping that they can be like, okay, I'll go away. But those people are more likely to like answer your emails. TV for me has been like very, you know, the opportunities have been very lucky, and the people that I've met and the things that I've learned through friends and colleagues and bosses and people like below me, whatever. I learned from all those people. But it's always been kind of like, I'm glad I met those people, and I don't know how, I didn't strategize how to meet them. But this is what I would say. Sorry, I'm rambling, but I was thinking about what would I do right now? And I would go to the credits of the shows that you like, look at the credits, and don't look at the executive producers or the showrunners. Go down the line to like the story editor or the staff writer. Find out those people, or the producer, or, you know, the lower level writers. And I would say you find those people and start and sort of try to like ask them, like, how did you do it? Those people seem more likely to be, and I've always felt like, and maybe I'm different, but the people I work with, I feel the same way. If somebody reaches out to you, I'm always impressed. I'm never like, oh, what does this guy think he can just like write to me? Like, I'm always like, oh yeah, okay, give me a couple months, I'll read your script and I'll get back to you. I feel like if you can find people's Facebook pages that are staff writers or story editors or you know, supervising producer. I'd say supervising producer is probably a good title to start with, because they're kind of like on their way up, but like, but they're still just, you know,
they have enough
busy,
room to answer. They have enough room to answer your questions. They're not belabored with studio problems and production problems.
Right. I feel like they're less busy and probably more, they remember what it's like to be you, maybe, and are more willing to give you a chance. That's what I would do now, although I've never done that.
Yeah. Well, you never know what would happen. You never know what will happen if you even try that. We have a friend, Peter Cohen, who I think somehow got in touch with David Mamet and said, hey, can I take you to lunch or buy you a cup of coffee? And David Mamet was like, yeah. And he wound up,
yeah, you'd be surprised.
He went to breakfast with fucking David Mamet. Oops, I said the F word. Welcome to the internet, everybody. Okay, I got another question here. This is from Asden. This is probably going to be best for Danielle or David to answer. What are your thoughts on whether or not to share your disability with coworkers in the room? Has it ever backfired? I don't know. Maybe he has a learning disability, or that's not specifically on here. But thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, thoughts. So I have cerebral palsy, and in my case, it's kind of like R.J. Mitty on Breaking Bad. So I use crutches or a wheelchair. So for me, there really was no option other than doing writers' rooms entirely through Skype. There's no option in which I would be able to hide my disability. And you know, there are pluses and minuses to the degree to which you choose to share that aspect of yourself, and it's a really personal decision. My decision, and maybe it comes from the fact that I have no choice, is I'm all in favor of people sharing as much as they can about themselves, because once you get into a writer's room, or even in the meetings to get to a writer's room, those things that make you different than the 99% of the other writers that they're going to meet with are the things that are going to be valuable in the space that you're about to join. In fact, a lot of advice that I would give is to have interests outside of TV and movies. Like if you have a law degree, a medical degree, have worked in the police force or military, you will probably have unlimited opportunities in TV writing, particularly in drama, because there will always be cop shows, lawyer shows, whatever. So if you can kind of lean into what makes you a little bit different, and if that might be your disability, that's a plus. Now, at the same time, I recognize that like there is a deeply entrenched and not particularly obvious bias that people have, because they think about like, well, what kind of accommodations are they going to need, or things like that. And that's unfortunately true in every industry in America. So the best you can do, I think, is just present the fullest version of yourself, and then try to gravitate towards those spaces that are interested in having you there. And if they're not, then you'll eventually find someone who will, because there's a growing amount of diversity in TV. I know sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but when I was in film school, there wasn't a Ryan O'Connell, there wasn't Special, there was. In fact, when I finished film school, I said, who's my Shonda Rhimes? Like, who's my person that I'm supposed to chart a path behind? And there wasn't anybody. We didn't have an Ellen DeGeneres or a Shonda Rhimes. So now there are a couple. And once you get into the inside of the machine, you start to realize that the relationships that you build are almost, in fact, many times are more important than the material. So if you surround yourself with good people, you have a better chance of success, and that goes for whether you're disabled or not.
On your point to that, something dawned on me, which I don't think I've ever quite put together this way, which is, I think we've all experienced productions that will bend over backwards for divas. They will bring in a special trailer outfitted a certain way. They will have particular, overpriced makeup or crazy ass wardrobe or limo services and all of this crazy expensive shit that is way out of the normal budget just to make this one person happy. But yet, if you need a wheelchair ramp to get up onto the stage, they're like, too hard. Can't afford that. We've got to get Diva over there 5 bottles of champagne to be chilling in her trailer, which are going to cost $1,000.
Yeah, and that goes back to my earlier answer about, just that kind of like the process of getting through the door. I think for a lot of people with disabilities is hard in and of itself, because most jobs into the industry start with being an assistant first. And until you develop a measure of authority and power, it feels very strange to be asking for what are really, legally mandated accommodations. So it's a tricky balance, because it's not like there's a space where there's HR that you can go to. You just have to be strategic in how you.
Danielle, did you have anything to add to that before we start wrapping things up here?
I feel like David did a really great job breaking it down. Yeah, you have to be your own advocate. And like him, I'm physically disabled. There's no hiding my disability. So people generally kind of, I try to be very clear in easing people's fears by letting them know that if they have questions, I can answer them, because people are scared of what they don't know, and people don't know what they don't know. Yeah. So if there's a problem, we can find a solution to it, but like being very clear that I am okay to work on solutions and that I can be proactive and come up with solutions just with my experience and being in a room before and like knowing what those hurdles might be. So being clear about what I would need. Also, for how to break in, I know David did the writing program at ABC. All the major networks have writing programs that you can submit to. They usually require you to write a spec of an existing show. You should also just have like an original pilot. Because I come from stand-up, I think community is really important. So if you're in the sketch world, the improv world, the stand-up world, meeting with other people, other creatives that are getting their work up on its feet, being seen, so that when someone gets staffed, they can bring you along too. They can introduce you to their lit agent, or manager. So I think that that's a really good, important way how you can kind of break into those spaces like a writer's room.
Awesome. Thanks. We've got 2 questions, one from Stephen, which is talking about keeping creativity going, and one from Anna, which is any good classes she could recommend. But I think both of these questions are going to be answered in our final segment that I've created called The Good, the Bad, and the Shameless. So what I have asked you guys to do is to come up with an answer to these 3 things. The good, can you suggest any learning resources for writers? The bad, what's a common mistake inexperienced writers make? And the shameless, what is a funny thing or a fun thing that you do when you got to get over writer's block, or if you're just stuck in quarantine and going crazy? How do you, blow off some steam? So let's start off with Rebekah. What do you got?
All right. So for the good, right? The good, shamelessly plug where I work. The Second City is a great resource for writers. We have an online program. We teach sketch comedy from beginning to end. It's a multi-level program. We have online classes that you're just emailing back and forth through the educational platform, but we also have in-person classes. And you can do sketch, you can do TV and film, you could do playwriting, you can do turning your own personal stories into a biography. There's literally, if you thought about it, we've got it online. So there's that. And I'm going to add this to it. The Second City is offering a discount code for anybody who is watching right now. If you'd like to take the entry level course in our term 3 classes, which run from May 11th to June 29th, well, we are offering 10% off. So if you use the code SCENE10, SCENE10, for one of our entry level classes, the term begins May 11th. So if you register before then, we'd love to have you in our classes to take some entry level courses that way.
Woo!
So there's that one.
Yeah, thank you.
You want me to hold off on the other 2, or just
no? Let's go through them all. Good, bad, and ugly. Give them all to me.
So the bad, I was going to say turn off your internal editor, but we all had group minds, so there's that. I would say, and this is something that I do, you don't need to tell your ideas to everybody and get all their opinions, because sometimes people kill your ideas, or they poop on your ideas and they make you feel sad, and they tell you all the different things they'd do with it, and then you start to go, well, I don't like it anymore. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't take direction from people, but maybe write it down, maybe exercise it a little bit, and then run it back and forth. But when you give it to the peanut gallery, you kind of give the power of the initial passion away. That's my idea. And mostly I'm
what I heard about the peanut gallery?
What?
They're fucking nuts.
I see what you said though.
All right.
And then
let's Shameless. What's Shameless?
Shameless is I am what there are plenty of people who write and they can't stop themselves from writing. I'm the person who's angsty to write. And so I have to bribe myself to actually sit down and get it done. So I sort of become my own mom, and my mom used to bribe me with treats. And so I literally get myself cupcakes and fast food and all the stuff that I try to avoid. I don't know if it makes my writing any better, but it's just, I tell myself, yeah, you're doing it now. So you get to have all the fun stuff. So there's always some Swedish fish, there's some takeout, and maybe when we're out of quarantine, there's some massages, and I just treat myself like it's a special occasion if I really am having a tough time and I can't get it done. So I just pretend I'm a mom bribing her kid to get their work done. I would be a terrible parent is what I'm saying. That's what I got.
Thank you very much, Rebekah. Hey, David, how about you? You're good, you're bad, and you're shameless.
Okay, so we live in an interesting time when everything is basically free online. So to my earlier point about taking up interests that are beyond TV, I think this is a good time to do that, because what else are we doing, right? So the more insights you have into stuff, the more valuable you are in a room. So I've been doing, I signed up for that masterclass thing that keeps getting advertised everywhere, and it gives you little courses, and I'm not saying they're like super intense or detailed, but you can learn a lot of like cool little things that can then that might generate ideas or spark interesting conversation in a room and that sort of thing. There's one on negotiation strategy, which I think is interesting and applicable to so many areas of life, especially if you're disabled. So there's that. And then also there's a YouTube channel called Lessons for the Screenplay, or lessons from the screenplay that I think is really good. And he does, I don't know what his training is. I think he's a film editor, but he has really insightful conversations or monologues about what works and what doesn't in a screenplay and why.
Is this the guy that breaks stuff down like with the movie playing? Oh, I've seen that before. That's great. Nice. So that's the good. What's the bad?
So I think there is a tendency to get so attached to a particular project that it inhibits you from doing other things. It's something that I'm feeling right now during this coronavirus stuff, is like the urgency to start something new isn't necessarily there. And I think it's important. I have to like sort of retrain that muscle for myself about this kind of comes back to our first conversation about just putting something down. And so I think a bad habit is to just limit yourself before you start. And also attached to that is to get so attached to an idea that you're unwilling to take feedback once it's ready or once it's close to ready. Because if your ambition is to get into a writer's room and you get into a writer's room, then you realize how much is going to change anyway. You can't get married to anything. And really.
You've got to be able to kill your darlings.
Somebody
and the Shameless. What do you got for Shameless?
I've been watching this. I don't feel bad about this because it's a good show. I've been watching The Leftovers, which I hadn't watched when it was originally on, and I think it's great. It's just sucking up a lot of my time. So now I'm in season 3, and I'm like, I just have to finish this to get on with my life. You know, otherwise I'm not going to get anything. That's been my guilty pleasure. Although it's like a genuinely great show, so I don't feel too bad about it.
Right on. Cool. Let's do Danielle. Good, bad, Shameless.
Okay, for good, I think especially if you want to write sitcoms, just going back and watching, like, if you like multicams, watch I Love Lucy. I mean, the techniques that they invented are still being used today. And for just really great, good comedy like The Office, watching 30 Rock, just you see like what Reed was talking about, where the jokes move the story forward. So for me, watching older TV shows that are sitcoms that are well done, that helps the wheels turn.
Nice.
Had the internal editor, but I feel like we talked about, for me, the fear of it being bad. I don't know why writing it on paper is so much more terrifying to me than just saying it on stage. But to just I hate that is part of my process, but I'll just write gibberish, write this is not a blank page, just to like break the seal, just to get it done and over with. And then the Shameless, when I get stuck, I'll write roast jokes. I love at the Comedy Store, so I will write roast jokes about people. People I like, people I don't like, but anything to just get it fired up, get me excited and interested in what I'm doing. But that my friend, she told me she likes to write recipes when she
does she actually try and cook them? Does she just make stuff up, or does she actually
like when she said she actually meant recipes, and I was like, a dash of arrogance, and I'm thinking like, like I'm now describing like a Nancy Meyers like story or something, but that's how I took it.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Danielle. And Reed, take us home. What's your good, what's your bad, and what's your Shameless, my friend?
Well, David kind of took my answer for good. I mean, with the internet these days, you can go listen to lectures by David Chase and Trey Parker, and you can hear them tell about much better than listening to me right now is listening to someone who's much smarter than me. So you can do that. So that, yeah, the internet. I'm not saying anything new. David already said it. I'm just wasting time.
Then what's your bad?
The wait, I forgot, is bad meat like bad
So
habits?
bad habits or bad mistakes that new writers can tend to fall into.
I feel, yeah, I think sometimes it's frowned upon when a writer is quiet in a writer's room and just listening. I feel like listening, at least for me, I mean, I'm the opposite of Danielle. I need to like do less roasting and more listening. I feel like as I get older, I see that in myself, and just listen. And then and when you're about to and when you speak, make it something that your boss can tell that you've been really thinking about. Because I don't think there's anything wrong with sitting there quietly for an hour thinking about something before you share an idea.
Yeah.
I think that's better than being like than talking all the time.
Okay. And what's your shameless? What's your guilty pleasure for getting past the blank page or just taking a break from the quarantine blues?
I mean, Shameless. I guess. I mean, I recently started doing yoga, which is, if anybody knows me, they're probably like, Reed doesn't do yoga, but I like it. And I have little kids. I play with my little kids. I do a lot of drawing with my kids, and I'm a huge fan of their art. And they make me laugh all the time, and they just really, like, their optimism is just such a fun. I don't know. I'm like such a little kid lover because I have little kids, and I just I don't know. My little kids, they distract me, and I can always like slap box with my son anytime I'm bored.
Right on. All right, guys. So when this is all done and we sign off, I'm going to go into the show notes here, and I'll put everybody's socials out there. So if you want to find any of these guys, if they have a Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, MySpace, whatever you want, I will put all of that in the show notes, and you'll be able to find it. You can find everybody here on IMDb. I want to say a few thank yous. I want to say for putting all this stuff together, I had this idea and I freaked out, and I was listening to an episode of the podcast Script Notes, and that is produced by Megan Arau. And so I shot her an email, and she was super kind and emailed me back and said, here's how you take a Zoom meeting and you put it on the YouTube and da 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 da. And so thank you, Megan. I am of the mindset that there is plenty of room in the swimming pool for creative people. So I have no problem. And I invite anybody watching this, if you have not heard of the Script Notes podcast, give it a listen. John August and Craig Mazin are not only incredibly entertaining, but they're super, super smart people. So give that a listen. I want to thank Nick Novicki from the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge, David Zimmerman from Performing Arts Studio West, Easter Seals SoCal, Real Abilities, Deborah and Alan over at the Media Access Awards, everybody watching at home and that sent in questions. If I didn't answer your question today, I'm going to keep them because I got them on Post-its, and maybe I'll answer them next week. We're going to do this again next week. Whole new people, whole new questions, whole new topics. And last, I want to thank all of you guys, Danielle, David, Reed, Rebekah. Thank you very much. This is how you applaud if you are deaf. And so thank you guys for being here. I hope everybody here comes and tunes in next week. Any last minute plugs before I turn this off of YouTube and we can all go back to watching Netflix and The Leftovers and finishing Ozark and all that other stuff?
If you your kids are bored and you want a young adult podcast to listen to, my husband and I are the voices on Richard Fairgray's The Tales from Black Sand Beach podcast. You can get it anywhere. And there's the graphic novel is called Black Sand Beach. So it's a fun thing. It's kind of spooky and scary. So download it.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebekah. Anybody else? Danielle, don't you do some online shows?
Yeah,
if you pitch those to everybody. Let's grow your audience, huh?
Yeah, if you want to watch stand-up comedy, I do Zoom and IG live shows. You can check out my link tree for upcoming show dates.
Awesome. David?
Yeah, check out Crip Camp if you haven't. Follow it on Netflix or on the Netflix Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff. And I also wanted to plus one, something that Reed said at the very end, which I think is one of the best pieces of advice in this conversation for those that get staffed on a TV show. Especially if you come through a diversity program and you know that you're free to the show, you feel this obligation to share ideas all the time. And I know I felt it because you want to make yourself valuable. At these lower levels in particular, you don't have to speak as much. You're mostly there to listen and learn. And I think that's something that people don't share enough with folks that are starting out. And if you haven't been an assistant before, and I haven't, most disabled people aren't, you have a lot to learn in that first year. So by the time I got to my second show, I realized I didn't have to do as much song and dance as I thought I did. And so that's something I want to pass along to others, the value of listening in these writers' rooms. So thanks, Reed,
Awesome.
for pointing.
Thanks, Dave. Reed, any closing comments, or you?
POC writers, I've heard it's the opposite, but I don't know.
Oh,
But from a lot of, but listening, very important, but I've heard feedback from other, like, they're usually the only like Black person or Latinx person in a room, and they're very much encouraged to carry their weight and like speak. So I don't know. It's all different.
Yeah, it's good to know. I mean, hey, read the room. Reed, anything to close us out?
No, not really. Just
All right.
thanks for having me, and good luck.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.